folks. I'm Supi Jankur, the founder of Santa, and my guest today is Nino De Alessandro. He's Global Technical Channel Leader at HSL and a go-to person for AppScan clients to discover business requirements and what is the best way to implement HSL AppScan into application security program. Are you ready to help us secure our applications?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you very much for having me here today. Appreciate it.
Great. So I know AppScan in the market for decades, but still for the people who is never used, never heard before, can you just a little bit explain us like what is HSL AppScan?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess the short answer would just be it's an application security tool portfolio. Okay. Now, the long answer, though, is really it's a set of tools to perform application security to protect your applications from compromising it from malicious attacks against it. Okay. So I guess that being said, though, I should probably explain what the offerings are within the AppScan just to make sure so everybody understands what we offer, what we have, and things like that. So first of all, we have AppScan on Cloud, which is of course, our cloud offering. It's referred to as ASOC. And so with this offering here, that we offer DAS, SAST, SCA, and IAS. So you get all those scanning technologies available to you. So it's kind of like a one-stop shop at that point. Okay. And what's nice with this also, though, is you got full dashboarding capabilities. You have multiple plugins. You also have really extensive APIs that are exposed. So this is, it's a good product set for entry level because you could really purchase per scan versus as well as to an enterprise customer because it gives you so much capabilities. So it's really can be anything you want it to be. And just kind of as your application security program matures, ASOC is really nice because it can change with you as you're changing your program. So that's our cloud offering. Then on premise we have AppScan Enterprise. Of course, as the name kind of says, enterprise, it makes you think, okay, that's more of an enterprise product, and it is. So this actually does perform DAS scanning, okay, but because it's also a dashboard console, you can bring in your static scan information to it. It also supports IAST, so you have really to be able to report on anything that you want within still the on-premise product. So it gives you full capabilities, and it can be spanned out across multiple servers for your scanner. So it really can scale up really big within those organizations. Now, there's other products, of course, that we have on-premise. And so our DAST offering for a desktop tool would be AppScan Standard, and that's probably something everybody's familiar with. This is really was the really the starting tool for DAST, and it's been the leader since it came out, about 20 years ago, and still is, really our flagship product. And so, what's great with AppScan Standard is it integrates with all of our DAST solutions, whether you're on cloud or if you're still with on-premise with AppScan Enterprise. So this tooling gives you the capability to create your scan in a really detailed way, and able to then either run it locally from your desktop with AppScan Standard, or if you're using one of the other product sets, you could upload it to the cloud to be run. You could also just upload it to your AppScan Enterprise environment to be run. And the other piece that's really impressive is once the scan's done, you could actually reach back out again, whether it was on the cloud or on enterprise, pull that scan result back into AppScan Standard to view it on your desktop, because that gives you that really deep capabilities that AppScan Standard offers. So it's really, really an impressive tool. And what they've done now with this kind of made into a hybrid tool to stretch across other products and offerings, it's really impressive product, and I just can't say enough about it. And actually, I think it was just about 2 days ago, AppScan Standard 10.0.7 was released, so that's our newest version. But anyways, moving on here. So then our other offerings for on-premise would be AppScan Source, and that's our static offering. And so this gives you that capability that you can run your static scan locally from your desktop, but also you can push your results, as we talked about. If you're running it, on-premise and you have AppScan Enterprise, you can publish your results to AppScan Enterprise to be able to report them on your dashboard at that point. So those are our commercial offerings. Now, I should also talk about AppScan Code Sweep. This is a plugin for Visual Studio Code. So it's really this IDE plugin that we're giving those people who are consuming this the power of AppScan, because it's got all the same exact rules that are in our static solutions that we're offering, but now we're offering it in this community edition. So basically it's free. And so you get the scanning capability for your SaaS projects. But again, this would only be supported by Visual Studio Code. And the only thing is, though, I want to make kind of clear too, though, is when you're doing a scan within Code Sweep, it's doing the scan at the time you save that file. So it's kind of like, think of it as spell check, if you're doing, working with a word processor, but so it's just at that time when you're saving that file, there's your vulnerabilities that we're finding for you. Where now with the commercial offerings, not only, you got full integration with automation, things like that, but you're really scanning a whole entire code base, whole application versus just, one file at a time. But it's a way to actually be able to touch AppScan and see really the power of it. For free within your, if you're using Visual Studio Code anyways, you just pull that down and install the plugin. So that's our offerings, and we really cover a lot of different things.
Yeah, like what you discussed, what you tell us about, so it's kind of like a tool set in a way. So it's like there is DAST, there is SAS, there is software composition analyst, there is an interactive scanning agents implemented. So these are like different pieces of it. Is this like, may I go and shop for each of them individually? So I have a SAS already in place and I'm looking for a DAST, so I can just go for the DAST, or should I go with like one for all? How does it work?
Yeah, so it really depends, what you're doing. So, obviously everybody's a little bit different within their security application program, where they're at, and maybe even tooling. So either somebody who's just starting off, what should they do, or if it's somebody who's already started and they want to, mature a little bit more. But normally when you're starting, you normally want to start probably with DAST. And the reason I say that is it's easier to really implement, easier to kind of wrap your head around it to get started. Yeah, exactly. Because and that's kind of the key word, what you said with the dependencies, right? Because what happens is, as you start looking at moving into SaaS, now it depends on how you're going to scan your code, okay? Because within SaaS, there's really two different ways that you could do this here, right? So a tool could go ahead and it could do data flow analysis, and with data flow analysis, it's really thorough. What it's doing is it's looking for all the inputs to that application, okay? And then it's trying to find, okay, each and every path within that application. So it's looking at all the conditional statements and things like that. And then it's looking for those exit points where it's, potentially could write out information. So it's this input to output, and so in AppScan we call it, the inputs sources and the output sync. So it's the source to syncs analysis. What we're doing, and anybody else that's doing static analysis, doing data flow, this would be similar what they're doing, but it's really very, very comprehensive, because again, it's looking at every single data flow and it's trying to figure out if there's a malicious taint that's starting in here at the input, what happens with it. Is there something in this intermediate nodes that's actually sanitizing that information for you or not? And so at that point, if we don't see a sanitizer and we see that we could actually get that code written out, we can actually say, hey, you know what, there's a vulnerability at this point here. Now, there's the other side of it would be more like pattern analysis. With pattern analysis, it's just it's looking at the source code kind of at face value. So it's just looking for a pattern, some sort of recognized
signature.
Exactly. Yeah. Signature based on what you have to figure out, okay, is there some sort of vulnerability here at this point? So one way the benefit of pattern analysis, it's a lot faster because it's
Yeah.
just looking at it from the pattern perspective. Now, the other thing is with data flow analysis, again, it gives you a lot more detailed information. But if you're working with something, you have to be able to make sure it's compilable. So now you have to have something that you can actually compile. But when you're talking about something that has to be able to compile, now you have dependencies. And that's where the word that you mentioned that it's kind of started this whole long conversation. But with these dependencies, now you have to make sure that you have everything that you need within that space that you're going to scan. So that way your application will truly be scanned and really get good coverage. That's really the key word, is coverage. Whenever you're working with an application security tool, whether it's DAST or SAST, you want to make sure you got good coverage. The other piece, if I just kind of talk just another minute here about data flow analysis, if anybody's familiar with AppScan Source, and even probably other vendors, it was kind of a problem onboarding an application. Because what would happen is the tool would start looking and saying, okay, I see where we're starting at. I'm following this here, but it gets lost and says, I'm not sure what's really happened here. And then what you'd have to do is you'd have to manually go in to mark up the code to say, okay, here's what's happening, because it comes with out of the box a whole bunch of information about all these different languages and these different methods and APIs, but not everything's marked up. Or maybe there's a new framework that's released. So at this point here, what happens is that the tool gets lost, and it takes this manual intervention to go in to say, okay, here's what's happening. Then you rerun that scan, and it's just kind of this rinse and repeat process. Now, AppScan, what they've done, they've created this cognitive capability, and it's called ICA, Intelligent Code Analytics. And what this is doing for us, it's on the fly. If there's a piece of code that it's referencing that it's getting to, and it's not already marked up, it doesn't understand it, it will on the fly make this determination how to mark it up, and then that way it can actually proceed. So this onboarding process doesn't no longer require manual intervention with AppScan. And this is available on our cloud offering as well as our on-premise offering. But this is really a huge game changer, because now you can onboard your application within minutes, where it could even take, it could take days, even a week, depending how big the application is. So it's really huge. But that it really dramatically helps everybody out, because now you can quickly onboard an application and run a SAS scan right away without taking a day or days to onboard an application.
That's great. Like whenever I hear a SAST implementation for the companies, like the enterprises, when they are implementing it the same in the first place, it is always a painful process. I think it goes because of this like bottleneck. You always need to have these fine tunings, like what is the issue, what is not, what is false positive, how to configure it. So does that kind of like address that as well, like to have not just for one application but the whole stack? When we are adding like hundreds of applications for this SAS scanning, that becomes like months. So I heard one time that we came into a place that is we are happy with the results in 6 months. So it takes like 6-7 months to fine tune and actually get in a point that, okay, now we are getting more benefit than, the cost of operation.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, and yeah, especially previously, right? It would take a lot of time to really move to something where you're adding your application security within your pipeline, and it was you can't do everything overnight, and that's why even like when I started talking about start with DAST, because you can't just flip a switch, say, okay, we're gonna scan everything and we're going to implement everything at this point. But right, it takes time to really implement it within it and to actually get it tuned to what you're looking for. Because when you first run a scan, there may be some findings that are found, and they could even be real findings. Okay, but to your organization, either you're not concerned about it, or maybe there's some other piece that's in place that's not incorporated, or the tool doesn't understand that's really sanitizing it or something like that. So at that point, you can mark up some things as noise. So in future scans, you could those things won't be so visible at that point. They won't be included in your reporting and things like that. But part of the other problem is, once you run a scan, especially a static scan, as you get so many results. Those findings, they're overwhelming really for a developer to come back after you run a static scan. And if I can talk about one more capability within AppScan, what we have is this another cognitive capability. It's called IFA, or Intelligent Findings Analytics. And what this is doing for us, it's analyzing all those findings that come in, and it's trying to make a determination of, is this really an interesting finding or not? Because it wants to help the user to really focus on the most interesting, the most pressing issues that should be addressed first. So it's going to filter out what it considers noise, and potentially even some false positives that it might think after it's going through this analysis to figure it out. So it will filter out your set of findings, and it will then give you a result set to say, okay, here's the findings that we feel that you should really focus on. But then it takes it one step further. It will actually then look at those traces and try to find a common point within the code. And what it can actually do then at this point here, it can actually say, okay, you know what, these 5 vulnerabilities can be fixed if you fix the code in this one specific spot. And so with these fix groups, you take that set of findings and now you're reducing it to a smaller set. And so at this point here, you could really resolve your findings in a lot shorter time than it necessarily would, just because we're kind of trying to be smart about to figure out where's the optimum place to fix that code and to resolve multiple findings.
Does this also help to decrease the number of issue tickets? So like in case, let's say you integrate it into your pipeline, okay, you run the scan, just saying like it finds an SQL injection on admin PHP and it found it in the members and so on. But actually it can recognize that if you fix in one place, that will be fixed for all the others. So instead of going and creating 200 issue tickets for the same sourced issue, does this go and, just go with one ticket for?
Well, yeah, that would kind of, I guess, depend on implementation, because it would depend on what you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on the issues that you're going to put into your tracking system, or are you going to focus on the fix groups? So, and then, especially like within the APIs that we have exposed, if you want to pull out just the fix groups, even you could focus on that. So it gives you that capability to say, what, maybe we should, instead of creating 100 tickets, let's create 20 tickets with these based on these fix groups, because that information would really help pinpoint everything that needs to be resolved without opening more tickets that are really necessary. Because that can also cause a whole nother problem with the developer, where you got so many tickets open trying to figure out where you're going, what you're going to work with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the end, like we all have, especially in the cybersecurity, the field, like everybody has 100 things has to be done yesterday already. So like when you see all the new thing coming up, it can be quite overwhelming. So what you said, to start with the Dust, then involve in the SaaS, we can integrate with the pipeline. But like when I think about the AppScan in general, the tools, it's the strength come with the configurability. That's how I see it. Like you can configure a lot, and you can go really deep and fine tune and change things. But do you think, or like this is also coming with a kind of a challenge for like a learning curve? So when you start from, if it's your first tool that you're testing it or implementing it, how do you cope with that? How do you make sure that your customers are, successful with HSL AppScan?
Yeah. So great question. So I guess when you're starting off and you're configuring scans, as you mentioned about the configuration, the better your configuration, the better your results. Okay, but that does have a little bit of a learning curve. So what happens is with AppScan, they'll start with a minimum set of requirements, what it needs to be able to scan, and it gives you in kind of a simplified version to say, okay, populate this information here for us, because of course you got to have a starting URL, so we know where, like for DAS, where you're going to start at, right? And probably it's going to be authenticated, right? So you can log into something. So we're going to need credentials. Okay,
those are straightforward. It's quite like the intuition in the tool. You see it, record, move on.
Yep, exactly. And then at that point, it's like, okay, what do you want to help teach the tool to understand to configure this with? Because at this point here, that gets you what you're going to scan, by high level, right, with the URL and logging in. But then it's okay, what, I want the tool to truly understand how to scan this here. So there's what we have called like Manual Explorer. And what this will do for you is it will actually allow you to kind of walk through your site, and you're not doing anything different than just walking through, clicking on fields, putting in information. But the difference is what's happening is AppScan's capturing all this information. So all those form field values that you're doing, it's configuring itself to say, okay, I understand now with this on this page here with this form field, this is what valid data is. So now AppScan knows how to actually submit a page. And this is really important because in order to get really good coverage, you can get to a page and scan it for a vulnerability. But if you can get to a page and you know how to successfully submit it, you can even get a little bit better results that way. And so this really helps the tool to understand how to make that valid form submission. But this quickly and easily helps configure the tool also for you, because then at this point, now the tool has all that information that you've provided to it. And now when it goes to do its testing, it knows exactly here's how to submit the page. And you can still do like automatic crawling to say, okay, anything that you've told me about a lot of different pages about your site, but I'm still going to look. I'm going to look. Maybe there's some hidden URLs either in JavaScript or just even in the pages that aren't necessarily visible, but are there. We want to find those so we can expose them and we can test them, because everybody should be made aware of, hey, even though maybe it wasn't even visible, but that URL exists, we need to test it. We need to make sure to tell you it's safe or there's vulnerabilities within that. But I know your question was really more about in the configuration, but it's doing that Manual Explorer that helps us configure it. But there is a lot more configurations that you can do. But when you're doing the configurations too, part of it, what it's to do is to help save time, because the better your configuration is, we could be smarter about what we're going to scan. We could determine, hey, we've seen this page before and the only difference is content. So at this point, there's no sense of scanning this page because we already scanned it, we understand it, and let's move on. And so this can really save you time.
And this like Manual Proxy is the part of the AppScan standard, right? It's the desktop application that I'm going to use it. Right.
Yeah. The recording proxy, I think, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yep. So actually, the recording proxy, they've actually included this also now with our cloud product and AppScan Enterprise. But the most probably popular would be with AppScan Standard. And with that, what's really nice is you can utilize that recording proxy to scan APIs, because at this point here, you could actually configure it. And now AppScan Standard, it's got some integration with Postman and SOAP UI. Yeah. But anyway, so if you're using those to actually exercise your APIs, so as you're making those calls, you can go ahead to stand up AppScan Standard's recording proxy to record that traffic. So you could generate all that traffic from whatever that third-party tool is. And if it happens to be SOAP UI or Postman, we got those hooks already in place, so it makes it a little simpler. We can it's kind of integrated. So as soon as you start it, we'll fire up that recording proxy, set up the proxies on that specific product that you're using. But again, it doesn't have to be that. You could manually configure that proxy, run those tests. We can capture all that traffic for those APIs. And then at that point, you could just do what we call like a test only, because now you have those specifics, kind of like what we talked about with Manual Explorer. You have all that traffic that you want to test. But in the case of APIs, you don't really explore those like you would a website. So at that point, you would just test those. And at this point, now you're able to utilize the tool for not just web-based applications, but now you got API testing as well.
Yeah, it's like I'm asking this because like I'm not sure if it's the popular way of using it, but like when I use AppScan, I use with the standard first to configure and make my all fine tunings and doing all these necessary changes, and then I use these settings in the cloud. So when to make this thing automate, so it's kind of a like two-way. My hand terminal is the AppScan standard in the desktop, and then use the everything that I configured on the cloud. Is this like the common way of using it, or how the pricing works, or doesn't work to have this kind of a use case?
Yeah. So first of all, AppScan standard, I can't say enough great things about it, and exactly as what you're doing with it, that's really what more the power users are absolutely doing, because you could just go to AppScan on cloud and configure a scan with some basic configurations, okay, and you can do that and scan it. But because like what you're doing exactly, you're taking the power of AppScan standard to be able to tune that scan exactly what you want, and then you can push that to the cloud to scan. So that's, like I say, more of the power users, and really as the people mature and learn about the product, you get, they're doing that. And the really benefit with ASOC, AppScan on cloud, you get to have AppScan standard for free. You don't get a license, so you can't scan from AppScan standard. But when you purchase on a subscription of AppScan on cloud, you get an entitlement to have that desktop application AppScan standard. So now you get the configuration tool free. So that means you can configure your scan, push it to the cloud to run, as well as when it's done, bring it back to AppScan standard to do that really deep analysis. And it's just, and that's free. It's all included. But now, as far as like pricing and things like that, we'll talk just a little bit about that, because with AppScan on cloud, it varies from, you could purchase one per scan. So you could literally buy one scan, and then, it grows from there. And so in the next step after the per scan would be per application. So if there's one specific application or two applications, then you would buy how many applications that you want to scan at that point, and then you can do unlimited DAST, unlimited SAST on those then at that point. Now, if your program is really growing, you got a lot of applications, then we have these like unlimited subscriptions. So you could buy them per technology. So you could buy an unlimited DAST, unlimited SAST, unlimited SCA, unlimited IS, and that gets you the scanning of one concurrent scan for that technology. Okay, but larger organizations, they would have so many applications, they don't want to build up the queue. They want to really be able to scan those multiple scans at one time, and then we support that. That's just you're buying multiple concurrency of those different unlimited scans. So again, we start from the smallest level of a per scan, and we can go to truly unlimited in as many concurrency as an organization would want.
Okay, it's quite flexible actually. So it's not just buy 5 FQDN and scan this. So you can go, if you need some, like let's say 20 ad hoc scan, and then already you also have like 50 applications there to scan continuously. So you go for 50 application plus 20 per scan. So you build your own basket in a way.
Yeah, exactly right. You really do, because, and again, as your program matures, you might be starting off, maybe we have 3 applications and we only scan them, once a year right now. So you can start off really small with it. And as you're growing, then, you can add on either multiple scanning technologies or and that number increases of how many you want to scan. Right. It really allows you to start with the same exact product, and it grows and matures exactly as your program does, and you can bring in whatever it is that you want at that point in time as you're maturing your application security program.
Awesome. So like before finishing this, like I have asked WeHack Purple community if they have any question for you, and I have received one question, and it's saying that roadmap for SAST in pipelines. So like the integrating like the SAST scanning into the DevOps. What do you think about it?
Yeah. So before I kind of talk about roadmap, let me just kind of back up just a little bit. So our AppScan on Cloud has a lot of different plugins to all these multiple different, environments, like Maven, Gradle, Jenkins, Azure, DevOps, GoCD. I'm probably leaving off a couple others, but so we have a really very vast amount of plugins to these different pipeline environments, okay, as well as the APIs that are exposed. And now on AppScan Enterprise, they're able to utilize some of those plugins from AppScan on Cloud, as well as there's APIs that are exposed as well. Now, AppScan Source, we have some plugins like for Maven, Gradle, Ant, and Make, but they really also have this command line interface that's available that helps you do this custom integration if you want. Now, on the roadmap, now I'm getting to the roadmap question of what the the person's asking the question is. So right now, the direction, what they're really looking for, they're looking at being able to utilize some of these other plugins within AppScan Source. So that's kind of the focus right now on the roadmap, to bring in some of these other plugins that are available from ASOC as well as AppScan Enterprise to be able to use it within AppScan Source. So that's, hopefully we'll see something come out of that in the future. But until then, there are some other pieces in place.
All right. Thank you, Nino. It was great talking to you, and we learned a lot. So I'm gonna be adding a link after in this video, so people can try out directly from there.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on today.